So Kathy, if you want to keep track of who wants books, we'll make those arrangements afterwards.
Terrific. Well, we'll get this started then, and I do have some nice pictures lined up. The meeting will start streaming live very shortly, and people will start also asking questions on Facebook. So we'll have to see how that works, if I can multitask here. But I very much appreciate you, Mike Billoni, joining us here. The book is fascinating, and it is just that the timing couldn't be better. Normally, it is something that, as far as the chamber goes, we're talking, just straight business, and of course the whole year with COVID. But sports has been extremely high in the Buffalo market these last couple of months, especially with the the Bills and the Sabres are looking good, and that's fantastic. And I read a part here too in your book that just said that when Bob Rich was talking about bringing that team here, he told them that this Buffalo market would be so receptive, and that is so true as far as our sports goes, that it's a sports heavy town for sure. So thank you for joining us to talk about baseball on a snowy day like today. It's something that we can look forward to, but also about business, about Colvin Cleaners. I see the logo there, obviously family business. And I know that you live on Grand Island, and you're very tied into the chamber there, being on the board. We appreciate your support of all chambers. But Mike, I have to ask, where's your heart really?
Oh, it's Lincoln Boulevard, Elmwood and Maine, the village of Kenmore, the greatest village in the state of New York. We were born on the west side, but we moved early to Kenmore because my Uncle Phil, 90 years ago this year, 2021, 2021 we're in, 90 years ago. And Ed, here's a story for you, and I'll work with you on this. Colvin Cleaners was founded. And I won't go into all the details, but it literally was founded on Colvin, thus Colvin Cleaners. But when they needed, my uncle was a tailor. And when they had more people coming in for dry cleaning, they would take the clothes to another cleaners. And, his wife, who was, the brains of the family, said, hey, let's get a building. And they went into Kenmore. And, when we celebrated his 90th birthday, like 10 years ago or so, my brother Paul said, Uncle Phil, why didn't you could have bought all of Elmwood at that time. And he said, I just wanted one little store. So he bought what was an old gas station at the corner of Elmwood and Mang that is now Colvin Cleaners. And, my dad was the home delivery guy for 50 years. And my Uncle Sandy ran the inside of the plant. And my Uncle Phil was a tailor and the owner. And, from when I was a young single-digit kid, we would walk over from 209 Lincoln and, put 10 cents in the Pepsi machine to get a bottle of Pepsi. And then we would have to sweep the place out and clean the machines. And then as I got older, I used to love driving around with my dad. And when I got my license, people said, geez, how do you know all these streets? Well, my dad, we drove around, and so I really thought that I was going to be the one in the family that would walk into the cleaners. And all of a sudden, playing baseball across the street at Main Field, we'd go to the town of Tonawanda rec department. And back then, the Tonawanda News published box scores. And, I love keeping stats also. So I filled it out, and they said, put one sentence in. And I put, Joe Smith got a base hit and the Eagles won 1-0. And I knew we had a loaded team. We were going to win it all anyways. And the next day that sentence got in. Well, it didn't take long for me to realize the power of the pen. Next game, I wrote 3 sentences, and then I'm writing pages and quotes. And the editor at Tonawanda News Call said, who is this guy? And so we talked, and I quit playing sports. I could never hit a curveball anyways and wasn't going anywhere. So I began writing as a sophomore in high school, 51 years ago, for the Tonawanda News. And you know, that got me into that field. And then Paul literally left college and came home 45 years ago this July. And I say, you know, to literally save Colvin Cleaners, because my father and his brother bought it from their older brother. But at the time there was a gas shortage and they're running by petroleum, and their cost of raw material went up. And, you know, how do you market it? How do you run the business? And Paul got in, and Cindy, you know, was going to school. She came into the business, and the rest, as they say, is history. And I'm just so very, very proud of what my brother and sister-in-law, and now he's got the third generation, and Christopher and Erica working in that business. And really the fourth generation, Luca, who's only 3, he was seen in there with a broom. So he's considered an employee now and part of the family.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
But you know, one thing on that, Cathy, you know, really breaking news, if you go by Elmwood and Mang, in the midst of this, and this is really how Paul is such a visionary young businessman. He was an essential business because he was, you know, cleaning for a lot of the first responders, but a lot of their business was, you know, a lot of businesses where, you know, doctors, lawyers, business people bring their suits in and their overcoats, their evening gowns. Well, since last March 11th, most people have been working from home and they haven't put a suit on. So needless to say, Paul's business has, you know, been affected by COVID, but that has not stopped him. And my parents have to be just smiling down upon him, because this is how we were brought up, but it has not stopped him from the philanthropy of Colvin Cleaners. Christopher came up with an idea to just offer the customers and first responders face masks that they would make from drapery material from Colvin Draperies, and elastic. And just a few of them, I handled the publicity for them. We got some publicity, and like half an hour later, the governor was on saying in 2 days, it's mandatory, everyone has a mask. So their phones went off the hook, and through today, they're still making them. They've made close to 200,000, you know, masks. Plus he's been able to show people how to do it. And so that's been amazing. And even in this pandemic where we can't gather people, through the Allstate Foundation and a lot of other, and the very generous Western New Yorkers, we still have done our Coats for Kids program. We couldn't do the large gatherings at the Knights of Columbus and a couple places in Buffalo, but we've been able to take them out to a number of nonprofits that need them. The Clothes Closet, you know, there in Kenmore, is a big benefactor of it. Sam Chifa's Bethesda Church on Delaware in Tonawanda. So I feel really proud that we've been able to help a lot of people in need, especially a day like today when they need a warm coat. So they're doing major renovation right as we speak. At the old Hillberger Hardware building, it is now owned exclusively by Paul and Colvin Cleaners. And he now is breaking into both walls, and that's going to be a drive-through garage for his delivery trucks. So they'll be out of there and out of the elements in the winter. And then 2 blocks down at Elmwood and Victoria, they had purchased, you know, a few years ago, the old Kate and Handler paint building, and that's where Colvin Draperies is. So, you know, Paul has a good presence there, and there's a good future, and he loves Kenmore.
And they've been such fantastic supporters of the chamber. I think since 1981, they've been consistent members and supporters of you know, the Chamber of Commerce. So we're very excited that they're continuing, you know, to grow and to stay here. I know that everybody was impacted this year, but it just is amazing. I saw some of the new services that they were offering, and I know even my own, you know, father-in-law took them up on picking up wash, just, you know, and dropping off. And so we're thrilled with Coven Cleaners. Just they've made a huge impact all over Western New York with that Coats for Kids program.
And hopefully this year we'll have proms again, and we'll be able to do the Gowns for Prom program, which is really spectacular. I mean, that is really, I call it the crying session, because to see these young ladies who otherwise couldn't go to a prom because they couldn't afford a gown, or they were, heavy and they couldn't find one large enough, they would come in, and it's just miraculous how it works. And every time I see that, all I think about are my parents who really love hanging around the cleaners and love talking to all the people, and so it's fun following in their footsteps.
That's fantastic. Hey, I appreciate the background on all of that. I do want to check in with you about baseball. Can we talk a little baseball in this fantastic?
Why don't you put those two slides up, number 1 and 2. Back in that, I got involved. I worked at the Tonawanda News. Unfortunately, that's closed. Then I was at the Courier. That closed in '82. And then I wrote for the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. And in January of '83, I was supposed to go to February 1 of '83. I was supposed to go to Rochester full time. And a week before, they called me and said, "You don't have any baseball stories, write one." And it's the end of January, and it's Buffalo. So I called a pal of mine, Vince McNamara, and he said, "Well, it just happens at Buffalo, which had a AA team that Mayor Jimmy Griffin had brought back here in '79, was losing money horribly. And if they didn't find a local owner by that Thursday, and this was a Monday, we'd lose that franchise and probably never get it back again." So I write the story, and the next day I find out that Bob Rich is the only one looking at it. And I had some history with Bob, and I called him, and he didn't want any publicity on it, but I wrote it and quoted an anonymous potential owner. And 2 days later, on Thursday, he went into the Broadway Hotel and gave the most passionate speech in front of Jimmy Griffin, and 70 or 80 investors had put up $1,000 a year in '79, and he offered them $100 on their 1,000, and and that he would keep this franchise because this is Buffalo, and we can't afford to lose the history of professional baseball. And got a standing ovation, and next thing he knew, he owns a team. And the Monday I was supposed to leave for Rochester, he hired me, and that's how my career with the Bison started in 1983. I think what really helped him and helped us was Friday the 13th of May 1983 was a phone call by a Mel Bourne, a site director for a movie. He was at the 11th and 3/4 hour to find a site to film the movie The Natural, starring Robert Redford. And he heard about this old stadium. He came in, and I won't go all the details because it's located, if you go to the next slide, please. It's located in chapter 1 of part 2 of the Seasons of Buffalo Baseball 1857 to 2020, in a story about all the stadiums, and under War Memorial Stadium is the filming of The Natural. But back to that first book you had up there, the 100 Seasons of Buffalo Baseball. After our 1984 season, the second of Rich ownership, I went to Bob and said, "You realize next year is going to be the 100th year of professional baseball in Buffalo?" And he said, "Well, we can't lose that history." He said, "Let's do something to capture that history." So I get a hold of Vince McNamara again, and we put together a really an amazing group of gentlemen who formed the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame Committee. And they were charged with, creating a Hall of Fame and putting, former players, managers, executives in that Hall of Fame. And at the back of this book, Jim Overfield has carefully placed all of the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame members, along with an inordinate amount of former Buffalo players and executives who are in the Baseball Hall of Fame, who came through Buffalo. One name that isn't on that list of the Cooperstown Hall of Famers is Hank Aaron. And unfortunately, Hank just passed on Friday, but he signed his first professional baseball contract here in Buffalo in 1952 at Offerman Stadium when he played in the Negro League for the Indianapolis Clowns. And you know, that's photos. There he is. That's him with the Clowns. And the next photo is of photo number 7, Cathy, is in 1985, we had an old timers game here. And it was an amazing collection of players. There was a promoter out of Chicago who was at the winter baseball meetings shopping around this old timers game. It was very expensive for us to bring in, but we got some good sponsors, and you know, we brought them in and we played it at War Memorial Stadium. We did another one when we opened Pilot Field in '88, and that one was the former Cracker Jack old timers game that came from Washington. And the one in '88, we had Joe DiMaggio was here, but this one, Hammer and Hank was on our cover, and I had an occasion at Old War Memorial Stadium. For those that remember it back then, we had a group above home plate on the stairwell leading up to the old press box. We call them the home plate dancers. It's about a dozen old black men and women. And I would love going up there and sitting with them because they tell some amazing stories of Buffalo years ago and what it was like at Offerman Stadium, a stadium I never saw. And they then talked about the Negro League there. And I never really understood it until they got word that Henry Aaron was coming here with this old timers game. And they told me about it. I went to Joe Overfield, our historian, and he was sitting with Cy Williams. And they said, oh yeah, that was quite a time back then. And Henry Aaron was 18 years old, and they had 3 teams, including, I don't know if any of you remember a sporting goods store, Dick Fisher. Well, Dick Fisher was a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates, Bird Dog Scout they called it, and he called up the owner or the GM of the Pirates then, Branch Rickey, and said, hey, we better get in on this. You know, this kid, there's like 2 other teams looking at him, and they ended up going with the Boston Braves offer, and at 18, he went off and he started his professional career. So some memorable moments. Cathy, before we go on to the next photo number 3, hey, Carl, good to see you. Thanks for the invite.
Good. I'm glad you're here. You know, and can I tell a quick story about downtown Buffalo and you?
Yep.
Everybody pats each other on the back about the development in downtown and the boom and the businesses and all the young people coming downtown. But I still think that you're the guy that built downtown Buffalo with the young folks, because my kids still talk about the days at then Pilot Field and some of the concerts that you had and bringing young people in and families. And I think that you're the man that built downtown Buffalo, because all the young people that went to those Bison games 25 years ago are now the ones spending money and working and going for entertainment downtown. So I got to thank you for that.
Well, Carl, thank you very much. But, you know, it's like anything else. It isn't one person. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be, put in charge by the Riches, but we had an amazing young entrepreneurial, hardworking, team of associates that, every one of us, bled Bison red, white, and blue, and we had a lot of fun, and it was a great place. It still is a great place, to enjoy a ball game. But back to the part 2, chapter 1 of stadiums, of which there was a stadium. Hey, Jim, why don't we ask the supervisor? Now this is Offerman Stadium, Supervisor Eminger. In the history of Buffalo baseball, there was a stadium that they played in the stadium in the town of Tonawanda, of which Jim is researching because somebody from the town sent the question. It was called El Dorado Park. Where was it?
You should probably ask Ed Adamczyk, our town historian.
That's a good handoff. Ed, you'll show us. Ed, where was that stadium?
El Dorado Park. That's a new one on me. Somebody's got to unmute Jim, I think. Cathy.
I can ask him to unmute, but he's got to do it himself.
Okay, Jim, on the bottom left, you'll see him.
There you go, Jim, you got it.
Yeah, Mike's a little bit confused on El Dorado. El Dorado was a
Oh, I'm sorry. El
resort
Dorado was
over on Grand Island.
Yep.
Where they
The
Bison-
Tonawanda driving park.
they were in a constant struggle to play baseball on Sunday up until 1919, when the blue laws were finally thrown out by the New York State Legislature. So they played a lot of games on Sundays, but it was never at the ballpark downtown. Police often showed up and stopped the game, and it was a big hassle. So they had a park out around Cheektowaga they played in. They had this experiment at El Dorado Resort on Grand Island. But what we're thinking of is the Tonawanda Driving Park, which was what sounds like a pretty big harness racing operation. And the president of the team, the manager of the team, decided that he would try to play a game at Tonawanda Driving Park. There was also a baseball diamond on the grounds. And a big crowd showed up, and the police allowed one batter to take his swings. He made an out. And at that point, they came in and they arrested the pitcher, the catcher, and the batter for breaking the blue laws.
And the reason they did that, and you'll see it on page 181 in the book, is that and this is city of Tonawanda, so we'll have to tell that to the not the town, but 3 city of Tonawanda clergymen, a Methodist, a Presbyterian, and a disciple of Christ, complained to Tonawanda officials and the Erie County Sheriff's Department that the game was a desecration of the Sabbath and should be prohibited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the judge, the case was tried the next day, Monday. The judge threw it out. None of the ball players spent any jail time. And I think he was quoted as saying, there are probably a lot of worse things that go on in Tonawanda on Sundays other than playing a baseball game. So, but yeah, there's one moment of glory for Tonawanda. Actually, if you type in Tonawanda Driving Park on Google, there's one Facebook reference to it, which gives some information about the grounds and where it was. So there is a Tonawanda angle.
So before we continue, does anyone have any questions or any memories of their own from Buffalo baseball, or going to either Offerman Stadium or War Memorial or Pilot Field?
I'm too young for Offerman Stadium, but I do remember going to the Bison games in War Memorial back in the 60s and 70s, and I'm an old timer. I loved going to War Memorial Stadium and watching the games. I know it was a terrible park to watch a ball game. It wasn't built for baseball, obviously, but it's still something that I enjoyed doing. And then when I started having a family, and I had season tickets, probably the first 8-9 years. The Bisons, when they moved to Pilot Field, what was then Pilot Field, I had season tickets, shared season tickets, and unfortunately, I lost the lottery with my partners on the season ticket to go to the first game ever at Pilot Field. But what I really enjoyed was when my kids were young, and I would just grab the 3 of them, And we had 4 tickets, and my wife in the April games, my wife would stay home, and I would trudge the 3 kids down to Pilot Field every opportunity that I got, and just still remember some very frigid April games down there. And the nice thing that they did, though, you could always exchange your tickets for those early cold weather games for something, later in the year. So I always made a point to go to 1 or 2 cold weather games with my kids, but then I turned in the rest of the cold weather games for the warmer weather.
Exactly.
And I still enjoy it. The nice part of it is, I still go to the games, a couple games a year with my kids and my wife. And it's just still it's a great day out, a great entertainment. The bang for your buck is still, you can't beat it in my opinion.
Well, thank you, Joe. Cathy, can you put up photo number 10? And then Joe, I'll give you a little trivia question, but you're going to know the answer. The last game, now this was one of our April games that Joe was referring to. I'm on the phone to the weatherman and then going up to the press box saying, oh, this is just going to pass in a couple of minutes, keeping my fingers crossed. But Joe, the last game and then if you could put photo number 5 up, please. If you recall the last game ever played at War Memorial Stadium in 1987, who was the winning pitcher in that game? It was the Vermont Reds, a Cincinnati Red affiliate, and the winning pitcher was a left-hander from O'Hara, Billy Shear, who went to who was on the team. Joe, were you teammates with Billy?
He was actually the last winning pitcher at War Memorial.
Yes.
Wait till I tell him that. I'm gonna next time I talk to him. I did not know that.
Yeah, and that's really where he met where he re-met Michelle. Yeah, there's a whole story. There's a whole backstory there. Well, yeah. Who's this? Who's on the screen right here?
Looks like Babe Ruth.
Mike Billoni. No.
Babe, no, I wore number 7.
George Ruth.
Yep. So why is he here in this conversation? Jim, do you want to tell this story?
Well,
and you could read about it in the book.
Yeah,
it's available at the Kenmore-Town Chamber. Tell your friends.
Does it have anything to do with Joe McCarthy?
Jim?
Not really, although, after Babe retired from active playing, he desperately wanted to be offered the job as manager of the Yankees, which they never did. And Joe McCarthy was one of the ones who ended up with the job. Now, actually, in regard to Ruth, after Baltimore, where he was brought up, Boston, where he broke into the majors, and of course, New York, Buffalo is probably the city that played the most important role in his life. The very first game he pitched as a youngster in the International League, right out of the boys' school in Baltimore, where he had been in attendance, was against the Bisons, and he won the game. A few weeks later, opening day in Buffalo, Babe Ruth again was a pitcher, and again he won the game. In fact, that year, there were 4 different games where Ruth was the starting pitcher against the Bisons, and he won 3 out of 4. But the biggest story about Ruth in Buffalo took place in 1920, and this was the year Ruth was playing for the Yankees, and they had lost the World Series, and he and a couple of other Yankee ball players afterwards decided to go on a barnstorming tour to make a little bit of extra money. And their first stop was Buffalo, despite the fact that there was a rule in organized baseball that no player who participated in the World Series could then go on a barnstorming tour. Thought it would somehow deprive the World Series itself of grandeur and importance. So Babe got involved in a huge fight with the commissioner of baseball, Kennesaw Mountain Landis. The Babe went ahead and came to Buffalo, played the game, and for his troubles, he was suspended for the first several games of the following season, forfeited his World Series money. And people feared for a time he'd be thrown out of organized baseball altogether. Babe made several visits to Buffalo. One less controversial one was one where he came in and part of a fundraising effort from Canisius College. Apparently some of the gate receipts were handed over to the college to upgrade their athletic facilities. And of course, it was a big deal, wildly popular. There was an overflow crowd to watch him play. There was big news in the newspapers. Babe played a number of other exhibition games in Buffalo while he was a player. And his last appearance in Buffalo was in 1938, 1939, when he was actually a coach for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the Dodgers came to Buffalo to play an exhibition game. And Babe actually played first base in the outfield in the game, took his place in the regular batting order. And it's thought that this was the very last game in which Ruth actually was in a lineup. He would show up at some other exhibition games subsequently in his career, but just would take batting practice and such like that. So it's a real bookend story where his very first game as a teenager was against the Bisons, and then his last game in uniform, played first base, was also in Buffalo, and that's where his career ended. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing story that the paths of the city and the greatest hitter in the game.
I have a Babe Ruth, Joe McCarthy story in Buffalo. And I don't know if it's in the book or not, actually.
I don't think so.
So Joe McCarthy, as probably a lot of you know, retired to West Amherst over on Ellicott Creek Road south. But he lived here in the off season for decades. And back in the early 30s, he owned, he owned it on Gate Circle. He had a building that is still standing that I had the good fortune of having to appraise, did a real estate appraisal on it about 25 years ago. And the owner was telling me the history of the house. And, he asked me if I knew Joe McCarthy. I said, yeah. He said, well, he owned this, back in the 30s. And the story was, because they're in the basement, as you went in the basement, there was a bar set up. And it was still there, and it looked like it was from the 30s. It was very, very old and dingy at the time. But he said during Prohibition, the Yankee players would come into star players, Gehrig and Ruth. They would stop in to see Joe over the winter, and they would sit in this down in his basement, and they would have some adult beverages down there. And every time I go around, my kids get sick of me telling that story, because every time I go around, when they were younger, my kids are all now in their 30s, but when they were younger, we'd be driving around town. I would say, I appraised that house. That was Joe McCarthy lived there. And they go, who's Joe McCarthy? And I would explain to them who Joe McCarthy was. And Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig used to sit in that basement and drink beers during Prohibition. So just a little history that on that note.
It's pretty amazing.
Joe, to take that a step further, in later years, a lot of other players had played for Joe because he was such a revered manager. They would come to Buffalo and go to his house.
And where is Joe McCarthy resting in these days, Mike? Where's his final resting place?
You know, it's funny. We should have Paul Langendorfer, who was helped with this book. He wrote a great story on Jimmy Collins, and he has, you know, Joe, I think, is up in the town of Tonawanda somewhere.
Yeah.
He is buried
Catholic
just up
cemetery.
Elmwood Avenue from
Yeah.
Colvin Cleaners in Mount Olivet Cemetery.
That's right.
Yep. And then we have also a number. What he has found. Paul has found a number of former players. Jim, how many has he found that are buried here in Buffalo?
Well, there are a fair number of them. I don't know what his county's up to at this point, but I know Paul has set this goal for himself, is to search for all the grave sites of all the men who at one time or another played baseball for Buffalo or just played baseball. But beyond
Cathy,
that, I don't know.
Cathy, if you would put a photo number 13 on the screen, please. Does anyone recognize you? You got Babe Ruth, okay. How about this home run hitter?
Robert Redford.
And what was his name in the movie?
Ray Hobbs.
There you go. That story is also told in the book, and it's pretty amazing. You know, when you look back, did any of you have any dealings with the movie back then, or were you down as an extra?
Well, I will mention that I just spoke with someone this morning who, as a young boy, tried out to be the young Roy Hobbs in the show. He was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and interviewed for that part. I don't remember. Somebody from Buffalo ended up playing the young Hobbs, but there's plenty of people who lined up to try to take that part, in addition to all the extras.
Yeah, that fellow was turned out to be Bob Rich III.
Oh, it did end up being a Rich. Okay.
Yep. And it's funny, this is how the producers and mostly the directors work, is as they were, this was off, from Malamud's book, The Natural. And as they were casting, the players and all of the actors and actresses around them, they knew the look they wanted. Obviously, they had Redford, and a St. Joe's grad, all Western New York, who signed with Danny Carnevale and the Cleveland Indians, Chris Raybaum, was brought in. We had a lot of local players who were filled in as extras, and local guys, Kevin Lester and Duke McGuire, took care of that. Raybaum was brought in to be a stand-in for Redford as they were preparing to shoot, getting the cameras ready, the lights. So Redford would be in his trailer and Chris would be at the plate, hitting the balls and all that. And then when they're ready to film, Redford would come out and do it. Well, Redford went to college in California and he played baseball. And one of his teammates was Don Drysdale. And obviously Drysdale went on to a major league career with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and Redford went into film. But his favorite player was number 9, Ted Williams. So here he is wearing number 9, and Raybaum never got up to take a swing because Redford wanted to do all his own hitting. And it was really a spectacular time. And we, as marketers, use that to draw people back to War Memorial when no one was going there. So we said, kept saying, hey, Redford's going to be there tonight. And he did come to a couple of games and a lot of the others, but a lot of local businesses made out very well. I won't even tell you who the official dry cleaners was, but the first time they were in here, the producer, Mark Johnson, and the director, Barry Levinson, said, show us around the top white tablecloth restaurants in town. We need to be private. We need to go in whenever we want, blah, blah, blah. So the first place I took him to was Oliver's, and Henry Garino owned Oliver's at the time. And can you imagine this happening today? We literally had Redford here for a whole week and no one knew. The media, we had it, kept it totally under wraps. Every night they ate at Oliver's. I won't even tell you, this was 83, and I saw a couple of the bills that came by and whoa. But we would bring them in through the kitchen and up into that area. If you've ever been there to the left, you take a step up and he could put a curtain, and he would close the curtain and bring them in there, and they would eat dinner and be there all night, eating and drinking and telling stories. And that's when Henry told them a little bit about Buffalo, is that Henry Garino, the former owner of Oliver's, who now owns like 3 or 4, his stepfather is it stepfather or step-grandfather is, step-grandfather is Ollie Carnegie, who in his retirement became a postman and was delivering mail in North Buffalo to Henry's grandmother, and they got a relationship going and he marries her. Small world. Any other questions, as we're now at 12:46? And if not, we'll go into a couple other things, but any other questions or comments on baseball? Cathy, if you would put up slide number 2, please. And as Cathy pointed out earlier, there's been a multitude of people that have sent her emails looking and wondering how they could purchase this book. So we're working out a deal with the Kenton Chamber. She'll take the orders. We'll sell it at the discounted price for the wholesale price of $40 plus tax, and that comes out to be $43.50. And you give Cathy your order, tell her who you want it autographed to, and we'll have a personalized book there at the Chamber on Delaware, and you could come in and get your book. Cathy, if you would put up number 11, or go to number 8. We'll have another question of who is this?
Butcher.
This was a funny story. This young man, you can't
It's the
keep,
butcher.
It's
can't
John
keep up that
Candy.
long.
Isn't it?
Go to number 9, please.
Oh, the butcher.
But the butcher, here you have Bob Rich when he took over the team in 1983. He came down to the ballpark and we had a meeting, and there was only, I think, a staff of like 4 or 5. And he said, I have 3 goals: to get us out of AA to AAA as quickly as possible, to work with then Mayor Jimmy Griffin to get a downtown stadium built, and to then get us into Major League Baseball, because there was talk there's going to be expansion. So the first goal was achieved in 2 years, in '85, the 100th year of Buffalo baseball, when Joe Overfield wrote his book and released the 100 seasons of Buffalo baseball. But in that very first year, probably the first homestand, here comes the butcher, who was a bat boy for the home team. And, unfortunately, it was tough to find a uniform that fit him. And they had a sloping net behind home plate, and guys would hit a foul ball. It would go all the way up to the top. Press box was right near there. And then it would roll down, bounce, and then come down onto the field. Well, here's Butcher with his glove, and he would come to catch it. If he caught it, no big deal. But when he missed, they would boo him and yell and scream. And then the PA announcer back then, Duke McGuire, who's now the radio color guy, he would, just start agitating Butcher. And Bob Rich looks at it and he says, wait a minute, who is that kid? We can't have this, and I told him who he was. Yeah, but that isn't the image we want to project here. This is going to be a major league run team. I said, all right, well, let me go down and I'll get him. And the next foul ball comes and he misses it, and the crowd starts booing him. And he said, well, wait a minute, let's watch this a little bit. and he sees that he's really getting into it. He said, find him a uniform. He's the Butcher. The Butcher's part of the team. And that was the evolution of Butcher. The next photo is Conehead, who worked closely with the Earl of Bud and other costume characters we had, because that was all part of the fun of going to War Memorial Stadium. We had to do something different, and these guys were all part of the fabric of it. Then if you would go to number 11, Cathy, these were post-game concerts. This one is at Pilot Field, and that's Gloria Estefan. But when we started that, again, there was a promoter at the baseball winter meetings who was doing these post-game concerts. And I mean, the price was ridiculous. But again, we said we couldn't afford not to do it. And so the first one we did was the Beach Boys. And that became a long-time tradition. We took them to Pilot Field. And unfortunately, the opening of the Native American casinos proved to be our downfall, because they were just spending, stupid money on these acts, and they pretty much priced us out of the ballpark. I mean, we would pay big bucks for them and production, and we would give it to our season ticket holders as part of theirs, and we would hope to make, cover our expenses with sponsorships, but it was fun. And then the other one we did was the Friday nights that they're continuing to do, Friday Night Bash with fireworks. And so we really made it the place to be, and that's what you'll see in the book. And to Jim's credit and his dad's credit, for the historians, and you don't have to be of Ed's skill set as a historian, but I challenge you to read in part 1. Jim has broken up every year from 1877 to 2020 with a summary of every team and a summary of that season, including, the leading hitter, leading pitcher, win-loss, the manager. So we were going to have this book released on opening day of 2020, last April. And really, we started the project 3 years ago. So really, it was going to be released April of opening day of 18 or 19. But we just delayed, and we looked, Jim and Brian Frank, who has herdchronicles.com website. They're both, teachers, and their attention to detail and the editing was just amazing with this. So we're set to release it last opening day. Well, then COVID comes and it delays the start of the bison season. So we're playing along with that, and then it cancels the bison season. So now we have the 2020 season with 2 paragraphs in the book, a picture of the manager who really never managed here. He was hired, then never managed, and then fired. So he was out, but it was him, and the season was canceled. Then they announced the Blue Jays are going to play here. So what was going to be a Father's Day release of the book is now delayed, and so, well, let's see how this plays out, because now the Rich's third goal of bringing Major League Baseball to Buffalo was really achieved. So we had to edit that a little bit, wordsmith it in that chapter. But we waited until the season was over. They get into the playoffs. We're thinking they may go all the way and win the World Series, but they ended in the first round, and we had Mike Harrington write a full summary of the 2020 season. Really the only one that I've ever seen written so far about them here, and photos of it. So now the book is off to the printer, and we went to a printer in Kansas who just reminded me the other day that their Chiefs beat our Bills. But we picked them because they came up with a good price for a hardcover book, because we're looking at soft cover, but also because the paper, the ink, the glue, and the box that it was shipped in was all made in America, which was a deal breaker for us, because we wanted to sell the book in the Made in America stores. So it's out there, it's ready to go, and we now have to be out before the Christmas holiday, which is the day after Thanksgiving. So we figure it's there, okay, it's done, no more editing. I do one of these talks for the History Museum, and one of the people watching emails me afterwards and said, you know, we've got to talk. And it turns out he's a professor at Buff State who in the mid 80s, early 80s, did a 2-year study on Mark Twain's, or not, did a study on Mark Twain's 2 years in Buffalo. And everyone knows that he lived with his bride in the Cloister House on Delaware and Virginia. What they didn't know, what he knew, thought he knew, was that his first place here was a boarding house on Oak Street, until he went into the archives and found letters written to him at 26 East Swan. Goes to City Hall, he finds out where that is. It's Swan in Washington. He walks it off. Turns out that it's at the Swan Street gate of Pilot Field, and it showed how long the house was, or the boarding house, and that Twain had the very back apartment where he smoked 10 to 12 cigars a day. So his residence was literally on what is now third base. There was an article written in the news, and then Eric Brady at buffalonews.com had one. So I quickly wrote it up, called Jim. He says, how can we fit it in? And amazingly, on page 121 is the story Mark Twain once lived on the site of Salem Field at the end of our 79 to 2020 intro to that series. So the book has an awful lot of great tales and stories, and I hope you'll be as excited about it when you get it as we are. And we'll leave it to any last questions or comments.
Hi, Mike. I have to laugh because at my home office, my picture that hangs above me when I'm on camera is opening day at Pilot Field. And literally every person who's tried to guess what ballpark it is has been wrong. And I've said to them, where am I? They're like, you're in Buffalo. I said, where do you think that is? Oh, is that Yankee Stadium? I'm like, first of all, if anybody knows me, they know I'm not a Yankees fan. So
Right.
Of course not. But it's always fun with people from other parts of the country or upstate New York trying to figure out which ballpark it is. And I always tell them it's Buffalo's.
Well, thank you. Hey, Melanie, here's your opportunity to talk to the chamber, and you're on Facebook Live. Are there any messages from the Better Business Bureau that any scams that we should be aware of?
Just keep an eye out for the vaccine scams. We know they're coming. We've got reports on our scam tracker right now. If you get a call, an email, see anything, bbb.org/scam tracker, report it, even if you don't lose money, just so we know, so we can warn the public.
Yeah, they do wonderful work there, and they do great work at the BBB. And I had a scammer hit me, and I called them, and we tracked him down, and it was a neat experience. So thank you.
I was just here to hear about the book, which is I have it on my coffee table. I pick it up and I pull. It's great because it's more like a reference. So you don't have to sit and read the whole thing. So
Right.
If you're just in the mood to read a little bit of it, it's always fun. So.
Well, you're such a huge baseball fan and sport and Buffalo fan. Was there anything in there that you picked up that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that?
It was fun reading about all the super fans because my husband and I are big fans. We're at the ballpark every weekend. But a story, I know you guys have stories from back in the day. My husband and I were waiting in line at the craft beer corner, and these 3 or 4 young guys are behind us, and they keep talking about Matt Harvey, when the Bisons were the Mets. And I turned around and I looked at him, I go, how do you guys know about Matt Harvey? He was making his AAA debut in Buffalo. He was a Major League Baseball pitcher, and they're like, we went to high school with him. So I was like, oh, that's so cool that they drove, because he was from Connecticut. So they drove to watch him pitch. And they're like, how do you know about Matt Harvey? I'm like, because I'm a Mets fan. So that was fun.
That's fantastic. I don't know, our ages range quite a bit here. My father-in-law owned Mr. Tony's on Hurdle Avenue for about 20 years. And they regularly scheduled bus loads of people from Mr. Tony's to go to the baseball games. That was a huge deal. And then, of course, they'd all come back to Mr. Tony's at the end. But quite a lot of stories, I'm sure, were made with those bus loads of people coming and going to the games from all over. School kids went, during the days, and there's just, it's definitely a bonding time for families and things like that. But Melanie, I know you're a huge fan. You brought me to there a couple of times with our outings. We missed those and
I
hope that
know.
next year we can get that back going again.
I mean, there might have been some playing hooky from work to see a few major league rehab assignments over the past 10, 15 years, but yeah, it's my personal favorite place. And on our Christmas card this year, I did a drive-by and took a picture of all the Blue Jays stuff and put it on there because everybody looks for our Christmas card to say, oh, where did we go on our baseball trips? So I had to take one quick picture of the Blue Jays sign in front of Salem Field.
Well, it's going to be very interesting this spring. You know, we're a little less than a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting, but we're still within COVID. And you're going to be reading some news about, you know, minor league baseball. The way they're operating now is not like they've ever operated. Major League Baseball pretty much controls all the minor leagues. So we're going to see new teams within AAA International League for the Bisons, and they don't even have a schedule yet. So let's keep our
I
fingers
have to
crossed.
say that this is possibly a collector's item now. It is the Albany single A team that was dropped by the Houston Astros. So we did an outing there, Cathy, like we did here for our Albany chambers. So I was looking for all of my Valley Cats stuff just in case something happens.
Well, Jim is in. He has the former Jamestown New York Penn League team in Burlington, Vermont, and I don't know what they're going to do, but I know a lot of the New York Penn League cities like Batavia, Elmira, Utica, Jamestown, Niagara Falls, they're all now part of a wooden bat collegiate league, which is really what the New York Penn League was anyways. They were, you know, kids just drafted out of college. So it's going to be a very interesting summer. And, you know, I just hope, you know, that the game, you know, doesn't lose anything. And I'll leave you with this, and you could read it on page 384 in the book, the very last page. What excites Jim and I most about this book is that a portion of the proceeds of the sale of the book is going to be going to a new entity that we're creating at the old War Memorial Stadium called the Joseph M. Overfield Memorial Baseball, Softball, Soccer Mentoring Program. That we're gonna, you know, it's really neat. We're developing it as we speak, but I'm very, very excited about the opportunities that's going to present us to really take inner city kids and give them an opportunity to learn sports and also be mentored by some really neat people in the community. So Cathy, with that, I know the supervisor had somewhere to go. And anyone else have anything else?
Mike Chipmillard, thanks for all that you've done for Buffalo and baseball. What a great day to spend, a great way to spend a day with the family here. What role did John Boutte play in the book? I see his name.
Yep, John wrote our foreword, and he provided us with a whole lot of photos. Anything else?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Cathy, you wanna close it out?
Yeah, I will. And I very much appreciate what you, you know, the stories and just the time you spent here today. That's just absolutely fantastic. And it really was a nice kickoff to the beginning of our series that we're going to be doing. And hopefully Joe Eminger got a chance to see how seamlessly this went, and that we can invite him to do the State of the Town at the end of February in a similar fashion. So again,
well, send me a link and I'll tune in.
I will definitely do that. But everybody have a great day. Stay safe. With the snow out there, came down quite heavy today. But Mike Billoni, thank you very much. And hopefully everybody goes and gets a copy of that book because it really is fun. It's a nice coffee table book, and I really do love a hardcover book. So
Yep.
I appreciate the quality of it also, and Made in America makes it even that much better. So thank
Thank you, Kathy. We'll talk and we'll work out the details of selling it at the chamber.
You got it. I'm happy
Take
to
care,
do that.
everyone. God bless, and God bless America.
Take care. God bless America. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, everybody.